Scott, you want to test your mic?
Testing.
Wonderful. Good evening, everyone. I'm Linda Newing. I would like to call to order the Newcastle City Council special meeting for Tuesday, April 4. It is 6 p.m. Let the record show that all council members are present for the study session, the special meeting. This public meeting is being recorded and may be viewed later on the city's YouTube channel. Tonight's item on our study session is the 2023 contribution to a regional coalition for housing, also known by the acronym of ARCH. And Director Mark Hoffman is here. I will turn it over to him to talk a little bit about this, and then we'll go to City Manager Pingle to kind of fill in and out. So I'll kind of watch your mic there, City Manager Pingle, and we'll get you in when we need to.
Thank you, Mayor. Mark Hoffman, Community Development Director for the city. In January of this year, the council passed 2 resolutions funding what's commonly known as ARCH. Newcastle is a member city through an interlocal agreement. Annually, the city approves a work plan and budget, and also an allocation or expenditure appropriation housing trust fund. We provided some information tonight to prepare you for a discussion that was requested at the end of those actions in January. So both those resolutions are passed. We're through with those for 2023, but a request was made to come back in a study session and discuss the 2023 Housing Trust Fund allocation for ARCH. We provided current budget data and going back 6 years in the materials. We've also provided some basic, 2 basic attachments for proposed House Bill 1628, which is neither alive nor dead in the legislature right now. The official status is that it's potentially alive to implement the budget, and that's the only category. It's never made it out of its House of Origin, so it's not officially dead. But we wanted to provide that information for this discussion, because whether it survives this session or comes back next year, and the next well, I guess it's the short session of this session, whatever the term is. The issue itself is a potential revenue funding source for affordable housing for the city. So we were hoping this materials would prepare you for your discussion. We're open to any questions, and however we can facilitate your discussion.
Okay, and City Manager Pingle, I see you waving. Go ahead, please.
Just to add a little bit to Director Hoffman's comments, we wanted to provide the context of House Bill 1628 simply from the standpoint that we're hopeful that moving forward we'll have a more specific revenue source for our ARCH membership dues and contribution amount to the Housing Trust Fund. And so I guess the hope for this evening's discussion was to be more focused specifically on the current year's contribution, and just wanted to provide that context. I also wanted to provide the context of in order to stay within our budget, there was a different amounts from what we put in the budget and then what was actually charged for membership dues. And I don't know if that was just a matter of things getting passed on to myself and Mark as we transitioned in and our predecessors transitioning out. We budgeted $26,000 for our arch dues. That ended up being 34,000 and change, and then budgeted $31,000 for our arch contribution. And so we've been coming into this discussion kind of as far as staff's concerned, our plan had been that we want to meet our budget. So we would already be planning on a smaller contribution than what we budgeted for, simply because our dues were so much more than what we had put in the budget. So between the two of them, I think that's $57,000, unless my math is bad. And so we would be hoping between our dues and our contribution that we would be that our total wouldn't be more than the $57,000 that we budgeted. And so I don't know if that helps the conversation or provides some additional context, but that we just wanted to provide that information also.
Thank you. Before I take questions, I wonder if there's any way we could maximize City Manager Pingle's, make him feel like he's a real part of the meeting here. You're just minimized at the bottom of our screen there, City Manager, and we want to put you in a bigger light than that. So thank you so much, Kate. All right, any questions for either Director Hoffman or City Manager Pingle? Councilmember Clark, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mayor Newing. So I might have been the one, it's been a while, I think we did this in January, so my concern, of course, as always, is that we, had a unbalanced budget last year, and we're looking for ways to save or reduce expenses. So I realize the numbers have changed slightly, but at the time I was concerned that we're budgeting, we've met our obligations to Arch, right? We've talked about it in January. They have the money to do the projects. And then there was the $31,000 extra that we were going to submit to Arch. And my argument or my suggestion was that, why are we doing that? We've met our obligation. We need to keep that $31,000 and not give it to Arch, but to keep it into our budget reserve so that we can meet obligations here in Newcastle. So I didn't necessarily expect a whole study session on this discussion, but my concern and my suggestion, and I don't know how about we would go about doing that other than simply not spend it, but I don't believe that we need to be giving them extra money when we need that money in our city. So we need to start seriously looking at ways before we start talking about the budget, how we're going to save money. This is one way to do that. So that's where I'm from, and maybe City Manager or Mark could speak to that, but I believe and would like to see us not send off the rest of that money, however that, it might be using the wrong terminology, but committing that money.
Comments from either Director Hoffman or City Manager Pingle? Just anything you want to add to that? Not required, but.
Yeah, and
Oh, okay.
it looks like Scott does.
Certainly let Mark can, if I'm jumping in, I can't see everybody. And so if I'm jumping in poorly, you can cut me off. Certainly would defer to what Mark has, Mark's comments, but part of the reason we wanted to bring this back to the full council in a study session format was if we're not going to spend that money, we would certainly need that to come from the council. We would want to meet our budget obligations, and so with the contribution would be reduced from 31,000, but just to make sure we weren't going to go over what we budgeted between the two line items, the membership dues as well as the contribution amount. If we were going to pay less than that or not pay anything at all into the contribution, into the housing trust fund, we need that to come from the council. So that's the main reason bringing it back in a study session format, was just so that we could talk about it. We also wanted to make sure that before we made that decision, or before the council made that decision, that we were providing the council kind of the full context of what we're talking about. And so that's kind of the main reason we wanted to bring it back in a study session, just so that we had time to, Mark and I are fairly new, and so we wanted the time to make sure we knew what was going on with with the two line items that we have in our budget and how we give money to Arch and so that, that's why we brought it back. But really, if we're not gonna contribute money to the Housing Trust Fund in 2023, or we're gonna contribute less than what was budgeted, we want that to come from the council.
Go ahead.
And just some further notes on the budget data. The accounting that we did with the line items for the January resolutions showed that there was an accumulation, a series of years where we contributed to the Housing Trust Fund, and then an allocation for this period of $179,000. The math associated with that assumed this $31,000 Housing Trust Fund contribution, and it is in the adopted budget. We have not been invoiced yet. We have not paid it, but it's in the adopted budget. With that math in January, with the $31,000 in the budget now, we projected a $29,000 and $29,100 surplus in the Housing Trust Fund that would accumulate with future years' contributions. And then what you'll notice in the chart on page 7 of the budget package, it appears in 2018 that there was no contribution to the Housing Trust Fund by the city. We were searching for a resolution. We thought it just wasn't in the file, but it turns out our research showed that a contribution was not made. We verified that math and that progression with the staff at Bellevue that manages or administers the Housing Trust Fund for Arch, and that is correct. So there's an example in the past where 1 year was skipped. And then, while I have the speaker, one further note. The original budget item number was from my predecessor based on a prior year's estimate of what the numbers would be for the budget. Somewhere in the fall, we got the actual work plan and budget and Housing Trust Fund contribution from Arch, and it was a very busy time going into November and December when we renew. It appears from this chart prepared by the interim finance director that the emails captured the correct number in revenue, but not in expenditure. And so what Scott was portraying was that if we balance those out and do not create a deficit in the Housing Trust Fund, we could stay within the budget amounts in the adopted budget. And so all those numbers are reflected in this chart. You'll see both the zero in Housing Trust Fund in 2018, and then a difference in budget of $26,918 for 2023, and a revenue estimate of $34,255. So that's the discrepancy, but we would stay within the budgeted amount. We can do that with the way the current budget is adopted, and then pending the results of tonight's discussion.
Any other, Councilmember Lakota?
So you're saying that 29,000 surplus is because we have the 31,000 budgeted amount this year, right? The
Correct.
29,000 surplus, you mentioned that we already have accumulation of 29,000 surplus because we have the 31,000 that has been budgeted.
Correct. The math that was shown in January included the $31,000 in the budget adopted in December.
Yeah.
And then with that allocation, assuming we made that payment, and then they went ahead and spent the $179,000 on those projects, we would then have a remaining balance of $29,100. If we don't give them the 31, we would have a slight deficit.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to adopted budget can always be amended, and we do that for other items all the time. Throughout the year, we are always amending the budget for other items. I agree with Councilmember Clark. We don't have the money. We're trying to give away the money that we don't have. You know, you're saying in Arch there would be a deficit. Our original budget has a big deficit already of $500,000. So I think we can take this deficit versus the $500,000 deficit that we're trying to cover up. So, I mean, given that this year we do not have the money, I think we can we are still paying the $26,900 almost 27,000. It's just the 31,000 we're saying that just hold off on that for this year. And then we can see how we do next year, how our budget comes up next year. And if we want, we can always bring that 31,000 back next year. But given that we have a big deficit, I don't know, we're just giving away money that we don't have. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Sherlock. Oh, did he? I missed that. Go ahead, City Manager Pingle.
I was just gonna comment that, we have already approved the 179,500 that would come from the city's housing trust fund at Arch. So we do want to make sure that stays whole. So we do want to make sure we cover that $1,900 deficit. If we do something short of the 31,000 that's budgeted, we certainly would want to make sure we can cover what we've already approved, we need to cover the difference between 31,000 and $29,100. So we definitely need to provide that $1,900 at the very least.
Deputy Mayor Sherlock, go ahead.
Thank you. Is this money, so I know we kind of glossed over the REIT thing at the beginning, but in this budget, in our 2023 budget, is this money coming out of REIT or coming out of the general fund?
You're muted, City Manager Pingle.
Oh, because,
General fund.
okay. And the housing bill you're talking about was in the future, we'd be able to use REIT money.
Right.
Not this year.
If it doesn't pass, so if it passed this year, it would be effective January 1 of 2024. So moving forward, we would have that revenue source for both our membership dues and our contribution amounts. If it doesn't pass this year and passes in the next legislature, it would probably be effective January 1, 2025. So, we're hopeful that revenue option becomes a reality for us as far as moving forward with Arch, just because then that does provide a yearly savings that's not coming out of the general fund, of around $60,000 that would be coming from somewhere else rather than from general fund money.
Councilmember Villasenor.
Thank you. I have a question. What is our current commitment to Arch? And I know that we went over this, but I know we help fund, we pay our dues, which helps fund their operation. And then we fund the housing trust, which helps to fund projects. So currently, I mean, I don't the details of all of what we've paid and what we haven't paid, but how does that, and when you refer to the $179,000 that are in the housing trust and that we're slightly short of it, is that our commitment to Arch? Is that our full commitment to them to fund the housing trust and to fund their operations at the level we're doing it?
For the Housing Trust Fund resolution, our current obligation to Arch is $1,900. So that's the negative portion based on the 31,000 budgeted not being paid yet. 1,900 would represent that approved resolution for the Housing Trust Fund. The second resolution was the work plan and budget, and the budget number is 26,918. The revenue and the correct budget amount should have been 34,255. So that resolution would represent a commitment of 7,337. So if you add those two to finish out those two resolutions, that's 9,237. I would represent that's our current commitment to Arch. Everything else would be in a surplus balance for this year that would accrue with future contributions towards some future allocation.
So some future commitment that we would make. I mean, so I just want to make I want to make sure, I support Arch and the things that they do. I think they do important work in our region. So I want to make sure that we meet our commitment to them. And if that is what our commitment is currently, I'd like to meet that. I mean, that's, I don't believe entirely that we need to put our money in a savings account that they hold. But I do want to make sure that we support them to our commitment and that we've made good on our word as a city, because that's particularly important to me.
Councilmember Charbonneau.
Thank you. There are a few things I'd like to mention here, and I think I feel a bit compelled to mention. I think, so first and foremost, when I've gone one-on-one to meet with Arch folks, and I would recommend everyone here to consider doing that, Lindsay Masters, who's the head, and I would really strongly urge folks to not make a motion tonight and invite those folks in that we're partnering with, rather than just cutting away from the contribution to them and then notifying them afterwards, sort of post-mortem. But the three things that I talked with, three things that Arch mentioned to me when I talked with them were, we want to improve affordable housing in the region. There's several things we can do. They said they can partner with faith communities to support local housing. They can take any land that is donated by a city or municipality. Some larger municipalities have done that, even some smaller ones. They can make good use of that. And then the thing they said first and foremost, and they harped on, was that any revenue source, any revenue source, we can make good on in terms of providing more housing. I would point to folks that, we talked about with the missing middle housing grant, how we don't have the local sort of expertise in affordable housing and middle housing on our staff to make do of that. That's what Arch does for us, right? I would point to in the agenda packet as well the fact that the money leverage, I think, is it says leverage local resources over 10 to 1 times effectiveness, and taken over just, not even all of King County, mostly just East King County, taken contributions from those cities and pulled in over $460 million in other funding sources. So I don't think it's something that we should be having a conversation of taking less of. And I think for our long-term economic health, we want more people to be able to live here. The more people that we can have that live here, the more of better services we can provide, the better, more robust community we can have. And I think if you want to talk about, I think there would be a general consensus that it is the cost of property in Newcastle is very high. The cost to rent is very high. I think that's mathematically undeniable. This is putting your money where your mouth is. So I think it's very easy to sit here and talk about cutting it. As someone that's gone and talked to these folks, they can make good with revenue right away. Read the numbers for yourself. The amount of housing units they've produced is very much a problem. And furthermore, we've had 2 full legislative sessions now where, regardless of what we pass, housing has been probably the most talked about issue. When those things pass, whatever they are, even if they don't pass, and they start coming around to give out grants, do you think they're going to give grants to the cities that pulled their money away from their local affordable housing organizations, or do you think they're going to give grants to the cities that stood by and actually put in the work and put in the long-term plan and were intentional with their strategic plan about affordable housing? We're intentional about addressing a lot of these issues. I think it's a very complex issue. I think it's very intersectional, but I very strongly feel that we should not take any money away from Arch, and I think it's a good thing that helps our community and the greater community in a lot of ways, especially obviously we have a lot more younger folks and tech workers moving in here, and I think we should have a more robust conversation about do we have any places in the city where we could potentially give them a small swath of land. I think the former city manager told me directly that, yeah, he thought we did. So I'd like to have more robust discussion rather than just looking at a blank line and cutting the number.
Okay, any further questions? Councilmember Clark?
Thank you, Mayor Nguyen. So what we're talking about here is a surplus, and maybe it's not 31,000, maybe, Director Hoffman just mentioned that we owe a little bit more, but regardless, we do have a surplus. And so while it would be nice to say that we want to help people who might live here in the future, we are obligated to support people who live here now and manage their money. So any surplus, and I'm not going to say the number, I'll Director Hoffman say it again, but whatever that surplus is a surplus, which means that Arch isn't going to use it right now. They're going to hold on to it for next year. So it's our money to hold on to for our people here in the city right now. So I'm not suggesting that we cut. We've already voted in January to support a certain number, and so I'm fine with that, right? We all voted, it was unanimous. So whatever that surplus is now, and again, I'll let him give us an exact number, that's the number we hold on to for the people of Newcastle, and it will help defray some of our inevitable pain when we talk about the budget later this year. So let me be clear, I'm not asking to cut money, I'm asking to take money that's surplus and use it in Newcastle where our obligation lies. So that's it.
Okay, remember, we do have an executive session, so I want to try to wrap up within 15 minutes. Director Hoffman, City Manager Pingle, let you chime in.
And this is the council's prerogative. If you don't do any change tonight, we would not exceed an expenditure this year for both categories of $57,918. We have not been invoiced. The work plan is invoiced quarterly. The Housing Trust Fund will come in the next 4 weeks or so. And so the current budget would allow us to fund those. If we want to end up for this year, the rest of this year, with no surplus, then the suggestion is to spend $1,900 from the community development line item to make the Housing Trust Fund decision in January whole. But then also spend $7,337 from that same line item to make the work plan and budget whole. And we would still, we would just not expend what I assume is $23,663. That would bring it to zero. Housing Trust Fund would be at zero until a future allocation.
City Manager Pingle, anything to add?
Oh, just to add, as far as any, so we did not put this on for action this evening. It was not contemplated that this council would take specific action. What we would need from council is whether or not you want something brought back to you to take action on. But we didn't provide for public comment for the study session portion and things like that, and so the council can't make a vote to only spend $1,900 or whatever the case may be. What we'd be looking for from the council is direction to bring something back to you if that's what the council wants to do.
Thank you. Councilmember Villasenor. Oh,
That was my
Are
question,
you
actually,
good?
if it was
Okay.
gonna come back. So he's answered my question. Thank you.
okay, so we can't make motions in study session, right? Okay, I always forget that. It rarely comes up, but I guess, you know, from what I'm hearing based on comments, is this is an item to come back to council. It seems like that was pretty obvious in the comments. Director Hoffman, did you have something to add to that, or?
No.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry, you looked
disagreeing
like you
with
wanted to say something, so,
that. I
okay.
just didn't know which date, but city manager and I can work on the available dates.
Councilmember Griffin?
Quick question. My question is, how do we arrive at what comes into the budget as what they're going to need? Do they set the figure, or they work with our staff, or how do we arrive at that number?
Through the interlocal agreement, they have a mix of partners, different levels. And so for our categories predetermined, they know that in the fall, and traditionally the city has adopted that in the early part of the next year. Work plan and budget, October, November, and December is passed by the Arch Board, and then we know it at the local level. Hopefully our budget has anticipated that, and you'll see an instance where, because of our newness, it didn't quite catch up this December.
Well, we were told in the past that, well, this is what they're expecting, and I was just curious as to how we arrived at what they expect.
And there's two categories. The short answer is based on population of the member city.
Okay, so I don't know your timeline to get this prepped. I can totally respect that. But if what I'm hearing is without a motion is just we would like to see it on a future agenda. Thank you very much.
I believe we've captured the intent. Thank you.
All right. So that brings us to, it is now 6:29. And we do have an executive session. We have completed our study session. The city council will recess to executive session for the remainder of the special meeting pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101I to discuss matters relating to potential litigation and legal risk. We will reconvene in our regular session at 7 p.m. Good evening, everyone. I'm Mayor Linda Newing calling to order the Newcastle City Council regular meeting of Tuesday, April 4. The time is 7 p.m. City Council returned from executive session at about 6:40 p.m., where the executive session lasted approximately 10 minutes. The executive session was to discuss matters pursuant to RCW 42.30.1.10, .1101I, to discuss matters relating to potential litigation and legal risk. This public meeting is being recorded and may be viewed later on the city's YouTube channel. Will you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, tonight we have an acting city clerk, Kate Langsdorf. Welcome, Kate. Would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Councilmember Clark. Councilmember Charbonneau. Councilmember Lacochia.
Here.
Councilmember Villasenor. Councilmember Griffin.
Here,
Deputy Mayor Sherlock.
Here.
Mayor Newing.
Here. Thank you. All are in attendance tonight. Okay, moving on. Agenda approval. Is there any objection to approval of tonight's agenda as presented? Okay, if not, please show the final agenda approved as presented. Public comment. Do we have anybody signed up? Okay, we do not. Are there any members of the audience who would like to speak? If so, please state your name, the neighborhood in which you reside, and you will have 3 minutes for your comment. Okay, seeing none. Anybody virtual? Okay, I will close the public comment. Tonight we have 2 ceremonial presentations. The first one is in recognition of Arbor Day. It's a proclamation. And for those of you who don't know, the city of Newcastle just received its 13th Tree City USA award. So congratulations to this city. And this is Arbor Day. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. And whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world. And whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. And whereas trees within our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. And whereas the city of Newcastle desires to be recognized as a Tree City USA by the National Arbor Day Foundation and to continue its tree planting ways. Now therefore, I, Linda Newing, Mayor of the City of Newcastle, Washington, do hereby proclaim Wednesday, April 26th, to be Arbor Day in the City of Newcastle and urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands and to support our city's urban forestry program. I further urge all citizens to plant trees to promote the well-being of present and future generations. Moving on, we have another important proclamation. This is recognizing Volunteer Appreciation Week. And whereas every year, volunteers enhance the city of Newcastle by providing their time, talents, and voices to advisory boards, special events, and projects that improve the quality of life for everyone. And whereas all groups and individuals who participate in the Newcastle community actively make a difference and accomplish goals that may otherwise be unattainable. And whereas volunteer contributions from organizations such as Newcastle Trails, Newcastle Historical Society, local scout troops, Friends of the Newcastle Library, Newcastle Arts Council, and the city's Community Activities Commission and Planning Commission are visible and enjoyed each day by the Newcastle citizens. And whereas the City of Newcastle recognizes the importance and necessity of community volunteers. And whereas the City of Newcastle is honoring the volunteers of past, present, and future. And whereas the City of Newcastle relies on our community volunteers and the work they have provided within our city. And whereas the City of Newcastle recognizes the importance of volunteerism and significant role that it plays in enhancing the Newcastle community. Now therefore, I, Linda Newing, Mayor of the City of Newcastle, proclaim April 16 through April 22, 2023 as Volunteer Week in the City of Newcastle. Okay, moving on. Council comment. Councilmember Villasenor, what do you have for us?
Madam Mayor,
I'm
I
sorry,
think we have the waste management next.
pardon me? Oh, I'm so sorry. I apologize. Tonight we have a presentation on the annual report from Waste Management. I would like to introduce Laura Moser, Waste Management Public Sector Manager, the Pacific Northwest Region. Director Bronze, do you have anything to add before we turn it over to her?
You did it perfectly.
Thank you.
Hello, Laura. She's going to give us an annual report from Waste Management for the year 2022.
Hi,
Take it away, Laura.
thank you. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. So bear with me just a moment. I think I've got it. I don't know. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can, but if you hit go into presentation mode, there you go. Yep. Is that going to work, or is that going to block out your screen?
There we go. Is that better?
Yep, looks great.
I'm
Thank
hoping
you.
that works. Okay, I think we're good. So, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. As introduced, I'm Laura Moser. I am your Public Sector Services Manager for WM and your point of contact. I appreciate your time this evening, so we'll get into it. Usually joining me is Joey Palakia. He's our district manager. He's pictured there in the upper right. He is not feeling well tonight, so he couldn't be here. He sends his apologies. He does lead our Seattle district, the hauling site, which services the city of Newcastle, and he manages over 180 drivers at that location, and a maintenance crew that keeps all the trucks running. So I appreciate him. He has a pretty heavy lift in what he manages there. Just wanted to touch on, we are in your community. We're members of the Greater Newcastle Chamber of Commerce. And we are involved with you and provide community support through a $15,000 annual donation to the city that helps fund community events. And we'll continue to do that throughout the life of the contract every year. So I'm going to jump into some of the information that was in the report we provided. This chart shows the tonnage that was collected in the city by customer segment each year, and you can see that we had some changes. I'll show you on the next slide, but overall, I think your residential customers are doing a great job at a 62.5% diversion, which is the combination of the recycling and the compostable materials we collect that aren't sent to a landfill. And so they're doing a great job in that arena. And then if we go here into digging in a bit more and just kind of a year over year diversion percentage comparison, we have our residential customer segment shows a slight decrease. And this was a reduction of about 145 tons less of compost collected this year than last year. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Materials could be wet, all kinds of things. But there was a reduction, and that's basically what that was for. The multifamily customer segment shows a pretty large year-over-year improvement of 6.2%. And this was due to an increase of 100 tons of recycled materials that we collected in 2022 over 2021, which I think is fabulous. I don't always see such huge multifamily growth in that area. Excuse me. And the commercial customer segment shows diversion reduction of about 3.3% year over year. And again, this was a reduction of about 79 tons of less of recycled materials collected. Overall, the community as a whole has a 48% diversion rate. Obviously, there's some room for improvement, and we can all work together in getting more out of our landfill and into the recycling and the compost processing facilities. In 2022, we have our Recycle Corps interns, which is pictured in that upper left, and Rianne, who is one of our ongoing staff personnel in our public education department. They were in the city of Newcastle last summer and visited about 16 businesses, sharing the local recycling guidelines, answering questions, and helping those customers understand what could potentially be contamination in their recycle and how they could put more into the recycle of the right materials. It was really unique to each business and the materials that they were throwing out. There was one particular standout that they visited, and it was the Newcastle Golf Club. They actually met an employee who was coming out with the recycling to put it in the container. And Rianne and the interns took the opportunity to do a quick audit of the materials that person was putting into the container while they looked on, and they noticed that there was plastic bags, which is, a contaminant in the recycle stream. We really like to see it loose. And so they took the opportunity to, work with that employee, explaining what the plastic bags do when they get into all of our recycling equipment. And it was really fun for them because they were able to really impact somebody in the moment of them actually bringing the materials out. They also offered, some other ideas for transporting those recyclables from inside the building to the outside container. The team also, on the far right, we were at the Newcastle Days this summer, myself included. I took the morning shift and Rayanne took the afternoon shift. It was a lot of fun. I think the community was very engaged in all the recycling games, the kids especially in, the recycling wheel. They can spin around, ask questions, and win fun little things like recycled pencils. And that's always a lot of fun, but I'm always amazed at how much the adults like to participate in the sorting games to see if they get the right materials in the right places. So we are looking forward to doing that again this year. It's always fun to get out in the community and do those things. I think this, I just wanted to touch on some of the investments that WM is making in our recycling centers. And on America Recycle Day last year, November 2022, we announced plans to invest $56 million in our recycling technology at 3 MRFs in the state of Washington. And the investment started with the closure of our CRC facility in Woodinville, and those materials that would normally go into that facility are being diverted down to our JMK facility in Tacoma for processing. And while that facility is closed, we've been able to do that because of our network of recycle processing facilities. So there's no disruption to the actual collections going on every day and or our customers. But when that facility is completed with its rebuild, which includes pretty extensive technology, putting it what they call a MRF of the future, some pretty incredible equipment that sorts. It will open again this summer, and I'm sure JMK will be a little relieved. They can not process as much materials as they've been doing right now. But it's really a commitment by Waste Management, company-wide, to make improvements to our recycling facilities in technology that will help create efficiencies and sort materials cleaner. I think that's the only way I can put it, so that they're prepared for the markets. So we're really excited about it and looking forward to some improved recycling over the next year or so. And then, just tying in with our recycle centers and, diversion of waste and recycling in general, I know it can be complicated and confusing, and I know there's a lot of efforts going on across the state and even locally to try to make lists of materials the same in all the different cities. And to that end, we offer Recycle Center virtual tours. They actually started a couple of years ago with the onset of COVID. We couldn't do in-person tours anymore, and we continue to do virtual tours, and now we're offering them on a quarterly regular basis. And our next one is coming up on April 28th at noon. They're open to everybody. If you want to get an insight of, what happens inside that recycle processing facility and how we, sort and why we do what we do, this is a great 1 hour kind of educational put on by our public education team, and also giving you, insight to the facility themselves. So with that, I was trying to keep it short and sweet. I hope I accomplished that, and really am available to any of you on an individual basis to, sit down and talk about what's important to you, what you see in the community, how we could be a better partner. So my contact information, I've posted it up there. If you want to reach out, I'd be happy to schedule time with you. And just want to say thank you again for giving me some time in your busy schedule tonight.
Thank you very
So
much.
I'm done.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
We appreciate the update. I'm wondering if we can maybe post that link or publicize it a little bit about the recycled
Yes.
opportunities. That would be
I-
great.
I will actually send that all to Jeff, and we have it on our website, but I'll send it to him. You guys are really great about sharing information on your city website also. So I will get that out to you right away.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Any questions for Laura or Director Bronze? Okay, all right. I think we're good, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Have a
Good to
nice
see you.
evening. Mhm. Bye.
Okay, now we will move on to item number 6, council comment. And as promised, Councilmember Villasenor, you can kick it off.
Thank you very much. My comments dovetail nicely with a lot of the things we're talking about tonight in terms of volunteerism and Arbor Day and such. But I had the opportunity to attend the Newcastle Trails annual meeting last Tuesday, and I really can't express how much this group means to our community. I know they're here tonight, so I'm not trying to butter you up, okay, Peggy. But their dedication and effort to providing our city the absolute best trail system is inspiring not only to me and to other residents of Newcastle, but to our neighbors in Issaquah and Renton who are also in attendance to that meeting, which is just amazing. So my sincerest thanks to all the effort that you put into our amazing trail system, and to dovetail that with our Arbor Day proclamation. You know, use the trails, get out there, enjoy the trees, and make the best use of their effort and the volunteer effort that goes into that amazing thing.
Thank you. Councilmember Griffin, what do you have?
Thank you, Mayor Newing. I'd like to thank Laura for the waste management report. I'd like to say hello to our city manager, Scott Pingle, as virtual. And I'd like to welcome the audience, the people who are in attendance. You add so much to our meeting when you're here, and thank you for showing up.
Councilmember Lacotia, what do you have?
Thank you. No comments.
Councilmember Charbonneau.
Thank you. It was very great to see some of our staff in the latest Newcastle Living, not just their faces of some unsung people who work hard, but also info on what they actually do, which I think can be kind of confusing if you can actually tell people in the public about stormwater management. I think that's a beautiful thing. And then I've just been making an effort recently to try to walk around to a lot of the places that we talk about having our trails, talk about having our capital improvement projects. So I walked a consecutive 4 days, May Creek Park and the improvements there, as well as the development across from the Heemster plot, and was trying to take that in and actually be out on the ground to the issues that we sort of talk about. So I do try to take it seriously and physically walk myself out there, which is great in Newcastle because it's not too far away to walk. So that's all I have.
Councilmember Clark, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Newing. Just I see out in the lobby, we have a couple flags that were dropped off. I mentioned it previously. Please bring your tired, tattered, and worn flags, so we'll properly retire them on April 22nd. My VFW post, so appreciate that. We all, as council members, received some comments about the slurry seal because now the weather's getting warmer. So I talked to the city manager separately about this, and I would appreciate during his comments if he would just kind of put this timeline in perspective about the 1 year, the warranty period, and so on, so we all can be on the same page. We've already discussed that a little bit. And then for my fellow council members, don't forget to file your PDC disclosure forms because I always forget to the last second, and I did mine the other day, so just as a reminder. That's it. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Sherlock.
Thank you. Excuse me. I just wanted to say thank you to, I believe, Director Brown's, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was staff maintenance guys that brought to attention this idea of the mini roundabout.
It was actually Inspector Alex.
Okay.
Yeah, Public Works Inspector.
Yeah, okay, yeah, so our wonderful employee brought notice that there was a lot of people running stop signs in this one area, and brought to the attention that it might be feasible to put in a mini roundabout. So we're looking into that, and we're going to see if that will work. But I just thought that was really cool that they care enough to bring that to the attention of Director Bruns. And I also wanted to say a big thank you to our interim finance director, Brenda. She's working very, very hard and extremely diligent and detail oriented, and making sure that our finance department can fix some past problems and work more efficiently in the future. So just thank you for all your work.
All right, thank you. Moving on, next is my comments. So, congratulations, Newcastle, for once again cracking that top 20 on the Safe Cities list. Love to see that. Also, I want to thank the Olympus and Vineyard neighborhoods for inviting Chief Kajahiro and me to, along with the Easter Bunny, to kick off an Easter egg hunt Sunday at Lake Bourne Park. It was cold, a little bit drizzly, but there were so many people there. It was great to see everybody turn out, and those little kids were awfully excited. So, great event. And that is about all. I mentioned our Tree City award again, so that's about all I have. Council committees, any finance committee?
Yes, well, Deputy Sherlock did mention that. No, it's totally fine. It's great. It makes my job easier. But yes, we did approve a design contract for a traffic calming measure on 116th, which would be a mini roundabout. So we'll see what comes of that as they develop that, the Heemstra property. Hopefully we'll be able to insert a traffic calming measure there, which would be, I think, desirable for many, as 116th can get a little bit crazy. To answer Councilmember Griffin's request for a snapshot, it is on the list, but the priorities currently with interim finance director Rolf would be the year-end stuff first, and then then budget amendment and that kind of stuff. Fortunately, we had this discussion in Finance Committee, and fortunately, we're at the beginning of the year, so a lot of the funds aren't being spent just yet. I think the bulk of the expenditures generally happen in the summertime, in the middle part of the year, because they belong to Public Works. So, but we have a commitment to get that back on track with the snapshot, and then hopefully the continued development, and hopefully an eventual launch of a dashboard that will be more helpful than perhaps a monthly reported snapshot through Finance Committee. So it's on our mind. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Charbonneau, you have economic development?
Yes, thank you. So Economic and Community Development Committee met on March 22nd, chaired by myself, and then along with Councilmember Griffin and Deputy Mayor Sherlock. So we had our Community Development Director, Mark Hoffman, as well as the President of our Chamber, Verity Swearingen, and staff from King County. So we talked about the King County Cities Climate Collaboration, also known as K4C. It's sort of a program to consider joining into that takes emissions inventories of cities, gives cities planning tools for addressing climate change, and I think very timely for us, does a lot of great job putting climate legislation into comprehensive plans. They gave us a great rundown of our emissions from 2019 onwards versus all of our neighbors, and our committee recommended that unanimously for approval to bring to full council to consider for approval, so keep an eye out for that. And then Community Development Director Hoffman did a great job of telling us about the sort of grant programs that we put forward. So the Small Business and Nonprofit Organization Grant Program, which was $400,000. The deadline was March 20th. There were 23 eligible applications of small businesses and nonprofits in Newcastle, which is great to see. Next week, and I guess it was next week then, in the process now of starting recommendations and looking at what makes sense for apportionments. and then talking about the technical assistance and wayfinding sort of different frontage improvements for different parts of the city. That was a $200,000 grant. We talked about putting signage along Coal Creek and Newcastle Way, and sort of welcome to Newcastle signs, and explaining what commerce was available, particularly back in the commons, particularly in sort of the high traffic areas. But that is wide open and open to feedback, and welcome to soliciting feedback. We're soliciting feedback from the chamber currently. Welcome it from fellow council members and audience as well. And I say as well because I know some people listen retroactively. And then, sorry, I lost my place. Yes, I believe that was it for Economic Community Development.
Okay, and Salary and Benefits Committee did not meet. Any regional committee reports? Councilmember Charbonneau?
Thank you. And yeah, sorry, I'll be quick on these. Two big items, if anyone in the audience, as well as staff or those listening. Mental Illness and Drug and Dependency Advisory Committee, there is a large underspend. So there's a lot of money dedicated specifically towards mental illness and drug recovery that typically goes to nonprofits that's not being utilized at the county level. Contact me, or and I can forward along if you have organizations that you know could use that, typically nonprofits, or I can get you in front of the right people. And then Regional Transit Committee, they're still working on COVID ridership recovery and soliciting feedback for that as well. So I can forward that feedback along if folks are interested. Thank you.
Okay, in your packet you have a report from the Planning Commission and the Community Activities Commission. Any questions on those? Seeing none, we'll move on. Director Bronze, I believe you have a slideshow for us.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just a moment while I.
Okay, and this is
Get
the
that.
capital improvement project update for first quarter.
Oops, I've got to share my screen first, I think, so that Scott can see it. Let me get them out of the way. There we go. Okay, thank you for that. So normally we do the CIP updates just as an attachment to the city manager, and it's just a piece of paper for you to look at and then provide an opportunity for questions. But since we've got a lot of action and activity going on right now, I thought I'd hit some high notes on a few selected projects. So we'll start off with transportation. And as Councilmember Sherlock mentioned, a new thing that we've got going right now is doing a feasibility study of a mini roundabout at the intersection of 116th and Southeast 84th, which is there's going to be a new leg to the west, which is the main entrance to the Heemstra subdivision. And I'm sorry, Councilmember, I misunderstood you. So Alex came to me and said, wow, there's a lot of people running stop sign out there. And then so I said, well, that'd be a great idea for a mini roundabout. So we don't have any of these here. I drive through one every day in unincorporated King County. City of Bellevue's recently constructed a couple. And the main difference between a mini roundabout and a regular roundabout is that the center island, as shown in the picture here, is fully navigable. So it's paved, or it's pavers. And that way you don't have to have as large a footprint for the roundabout. Typically in a regular roundabout, when you cannot traverse the central island, then your design vehicle is critical to establishing the footprint. And that may be either it's a school bus or a moving van, something like that. So that's why you get these really large diameter raised islands. But in the case right here, you could say, well, school buses you design for them to go over top. Or maybe you say, okay, school buses will go around, but a moving van will go over the top. And it's raised, so it's to discourage cars from going through there. A car could go over it, but it's not going to be a pleasant ride. It'll be going over like some speed bumps, essentially, one large speed bump. And so the idea came up. We quickly got the developer at the table to see if they're interested, and they were, to their credit, both the developer and the contractor. So we said, well, if the city can quickly do a feasibility, and the main thing was that Heemstra is going to be constructing improvements on the west side of the intersection. And we wanted to not preclude a mini roundabout, and so that's the critical path. So this effort here by Petit is just going to look at the feasibility and the footprint, and they're due to have that work completed by the end of April. And then we'd take that to the developer and see where it's at, and they're also going to do a preliminary cost estimate. We'll have a conversation with them, and the range of possibilities would be on one end doing nothing. The other end would be having them incorporating all of it into their project. And then something in between might be that they build the west improvements to match what a mini roundabout would be, and then the city comes along later and finishes the rest. So stay tuned, we'll have an update for you in May or June. And then our next project, T11, which is our pavement management program. This year we're doing kind of a collection of activities consisting of patching, crack sealing, and curb ramp updates. Some of that is all in preparation for next year. We have a $600,000 federal grant, and that's a 1-to-1 match. So it'll be a $1.2 million project, and that's going to do improvements on May Creek Park Drive. Do pavement overlay on May Creek Park Drive and 116th. And one of the elements whenever you do a pavement overlay, if there's a curb ramp that is deficient, you're required to update that. And in particular, if there's federal funds involved, DOT inspectors will come out afterwards to make sure it's compliant. So it's typically paving contractors do not want to mess around with concrete, so they will sub that out. So one of the things we're going to do this year is do that work in 2023 so that everything's ready to go for 2024 for the overlay. So that's one of the components that we're going to be doing this year as well. As well as the last bullet there is actually doing the design for the federal overlay so that we can bid that work out in the beginning of 2024 and get the majority of the design work completed this year. And then related to that, we are doing our citywide condition survey for all of the pavement. That's actually scheduled for next week, week of April 10th. They were last in the city in 2021 and updated just the arterials. And then they did the citywide survey in 2019. And at some point in 2022, early 22, we had a discussion at council to talk about the results of that 2021 report. And it was telling us that the planned funding was not going to be enough to match our desired level of service. And I was concerned about making a long-term decision on that because we only had 2 data points. So we kind of basically deferred the discussion until we get this 3rd data point, which will really validate where the pavement aging trends are. So we're expecting to have their report in hopefully May, and then we would come back and schedule a study session to talk about the results and make some recommendations before we get into the secure TIP discussion. So those are the next steps. And then, so this is we've got a couple bid openings that are in the process right now. The T38 project, which is permanently relocating the bus stop across the street here on Newcastle Way, project that's been in the works for many years and it's now finally reaching conclusion. So we're going to have open bids tomorrow in this project, and then we'll be back here at the next council meeting to award that bid. And I believe this is the last transportation project. In January, I believe most of you were at the ribbon cutting for the phase 1 of the T47 improvements. And just right to the east of where we are standing, this next project will take off. It's under design right now, and it'll complete the gap between the city's improvements from last year and then the improvements constructed by the May Creek Park assemblage. And if you look, well, what improvements? Well, they did a gravel walkway there. So this will complete the gap between 121st and 124th. And we're planning to do a bid additive, which is you have a base bid, which will construct the improvements that are shown on the screen. And then a bid additive is an optional component that you can ask for pricing. And that would include closing the sidewalk from the end of this project to the roundabout. So we'll see where the prices are and see if that's something that's feasible. And then one thing just to note, this project has a small right-of-way take, which is there on the right corner and highlighted in cyan. So it's been a while since we've had any right-of-way acquisition associated with a capital project. And we have been in touch with this property owner so they know that it's coming. I'm not sure why my floating toolbar keeps making noise here, but okay, we're going to move on to parks. And one thing, with the addition of Davi being on board, he just gave a capital update to the CAC at the last meeting. So that's one thing I'm looking forward to, having the CAC be more engaged in the capital projects. So first off, we have a relatively new capital program allocation called just general park improvements. And this was established to capture the irregular capital improvements. They're not recurring repairs, but the long-term minor improvements that don't warrant something as big as its own capital project. So it's things like when we did the pave, and this can use some of the things that we had previously used the parks maintenance money, now we're using REIT money for. So for instance, when we did the pavement seal of Lake Bourne Park a couple years ago, and this planned work at the dock, the boardwalk at Hazelwood Park, we had planned that work this year, and after talking to a contractor and some engineers, the work's a little bit more involved than we had initially planned. So we're looking to see what that would cost and get that number so we can get that into the 2024 budget and hopefully construct that next year. Another area that's seen a lot of work compared to years previously is P05, which is trail improvements. Throughout the city, there are a large number of trail bollards that are either like the sign in the lower corner that have just the city sign on top and no directional signs below, or even a bollard like the one up top that's empty of signs. And those happened when the Parks and Trails planner position was vacant, but yet we had development ongoing that was installing trails, and we didn't have the resources to develop the signage in terms of like the example below, the directional, which directions and which dimensions. It's a pretty detailed process. I kind of akin it to project specifications, where you just have to kind of really get in the mode of being consistent and making sure that the bollards show kind of consistent information throughout the city. So Julie Casada, the former Parks and Trails planner, when she left, she asked if she could do this effort, because it was one of the things that she was felt bad that she was never able to get to this work, and knowing that there's a significant backlog. So she's been doing this work for several months and made great progress. In fact, we just had our first sign order of about 96 signs come in, and our second one is getting quotes right now. So a total of 240 signs, and those are on existing and new bollards. And you think, well, 240 signs, that's a lot. But just that bollard on the bottom, that's 4. And there may be more, because it could have up to 8 signs on a particular bollard. And then there's a bunch of existing signs, like the example there. I know there's several in the Highlands subdivision that don't have a navigational sign. And then 18 new bollards. So as those come in, our city crews will be installing those. Another element too that W is coordinating with Newcastle Trails is beginning work on the horse trail, which starts off at the May Creek Parkway roundabout, and that would take advantage of the newly constructed improvements on the Sylvan Trail that were constructed by the assemblage. Next up is the cemetery fence replacement. And many of you attended a recognition ceremony for our local legislators who were instrumental in getting us a $72,000 grant last leader cycle. This work is actually scheduled for construction in 2024. Depending on workload, we may start the design later this year or beginning of next year. And the big crown jewel of our capital program is the first phase of improvements to Lake Bourne Park. That is also up for bids right now. That bid opening is this Thursday, and very excited to see how the bids come in for that project. And then that would come to you at the next meeting, April 18th, for a bid award. Construction we expect would start May or June, and then hopefully be finished up by September. I doubt it would be completed by Newcastle days, but there might be enough soft opening at that time. We'll see. And then we were fortunate enough to receive a $500,000 grant from the King County Parks Levy in 2021. Future phases for Lake Bourne Park, we're looking at the amphitheater, which will be a permanent structure to facilitate or replace the kind of money pit wood stage that's there now. We just submitted a $1 million grant for King County. They increased the maximum. In 2021, it was a $500,000 maximum with no match required, and now it's a $1 million maximum grant with no match required. So that just got submitted a few weeks ago, so we won't hear for a while. And then some other work where the next phase of work too, in addition to the amphitheater, would be looking at the off-leash area that's located just to the south of the Crosstown Trail improvements, which are circled in red there. And lastly, we have improvements to our much-loved fishing dock. This was, again, another project where we were successful in receiving funds from our legislators last year. We had what would you call it, like a technical analysis done several years ago, And initially, we had high hopes that maybe our city crew could do it, and we just underestimated the work that was involved. Namely, we're not going to have our guys go scuba diving to do these repairs. So we're in the process of preparing the bid package now and hope to have that under construction this summer. All right. So I have one swim project to talk about, and it's also on the later on the agenda for a final design contract. So I'll go over the project now, and we can have questions now, or we can do them when it comes up on the agenda, either way. So I honestly don't recall the last time we talked about this project in detail. I think several council members here have not received a presentation. So I thought I'd just go back a little bit and do a broad overview. This is a very unique project. I know when I first heard about it, we were kind of just scratching our head as to what exactly are we doing here. So originally it was a trestle. There's photo, I think in the hallway here, there's a photo of the old historic trestle. And at some point it got backfilled. This is trestle for the coal railroad. And at some point it got backfilled. And under the backfill was a culvert about 230 feet long for Newport Hills Creek. And at some point somebody put a standpipe or riser, vertical riser on the inlet end to be able to create a pond. That was all well and good. And then in 1994, the Dam Safety Office, which is under the Department of Ecology, came out and did an inspection on it. Don't know why, but because subsequent they said, well, it got classified as a dam, and then in 2012 they said, well, actually it's not a dam. Similar, if you think about it, it's no different than a culvert under a highway. You've got an embankment for the highway, and you've got a culvert under it, and they don't consider those dams. So that's a kind of a separate tangent to get this delisted. But the more immediate problem presented itself in 2018, that vertical riser had something happen, and we don't know what. We think maybe a tree hit it, so that it failed to function. So the water did not release at the previous rate. And when we had all the high rain event in the beginning of 2020, that became a significant problem. The water level rose about 10 feet in 24 hours. And that was, and the one other, sorry, I keep bringing these elements. Since it was not constructed like a highway embankment or a dam, it was just a backfilled railroad embankment. It was not necessarily built to any engineering standard. So there's a lot of concern, and also it's known that there is coal and wood timbers and all kinds of other junk in that embankment. So it's certainly not a well-constructed embankment. And that led to concerns as the water was filling up that could it breach? Would it find fissures through there? So our crews were out there 24/7 manning pumps at that time, and that really accelerated the desire to fix this broken standpipe. One benefit is we got some federal funding from FEMA because that weather event in late February of 2020 was a federally declared disaster. So here's just kind of a cartoon depicting, this is McKenna, Maria's daughter, made this little graphic when she was here as a stormwater intern. And so here's the culvert here at the bottom. And then this old standpipe was what had the problem. And just in the May Creek Trails right here at the top, this is about 55 feet tall. And so completed work, you can see over the bottom there, now this riser's been fixed. And that was completed in 2020. But before we could do that work, we had to reach out to the regulatory agencies, primarily the Muckleshoot tribe, as well as the Department of Ecology and Department of Fish and Wildlife. And in order to obtain permission to do this in-water work and affect the stream, the city had to commit to an eventual project to address the fish passage. So I think most of you are well aware that that's a significant problem statewide of all the culverts that have been installed and the impact to fisheries and fish runs. So they gave us the go-ahead to install this work, and with the commitment that we would eventually design and permit. Luckily, they didn't say construction. They stopped there, but that we'd have to go through with permitting and design for the work to restore fish passage. And that is what the design contract is on the agenda for later tonight. So in order to get there, what are the options to restore fish passage? There's the obvious one of take the embankment away. They also looked at potentially making a bottomless or larger fish culvert to allow passage. And that one was did not move further into the analysis phase because of concerns from the geotechnical side of things, as well as from the Department of Ecology in terms of it not being adequate or having too long of a length of a dark area, because darkness is a big issue for fish passage, as well as the actual stream embedment and stream profile. So the recommended alternative coming out of that was to remove the embankment at a planning level cost of $3.2 million. So the work plan for 2023 is to complete that final design that we were committed to do. Fortunately, we have about $156,000 of grants, so that's going to cover the lion's share of the cost of the project. And just to orient this little graphic on the bottom, the hatched area in the middle is the embankment here. This would be the area of the earth that would be removed. The black dash is the culvert that would then come out, and then the blue dash is the current location of the creek. So as you heard, we had originally planned to bring this action item to you for the contract a few months ago, and there was a lot of vocal support from the public to maintain the current alignment of the trail. In the preliminary analysis, it was just, in hindsight, inadvertently abrupt to just we'll just put it around instead of maintaining it. So we've now made a commitment to keep that trail alignment. In order to do that, it requires a long bridge, approximately 270 feet long, estimated to cost about $750,000. But that element is separated for a couple reasons, separated from the design contract that's before you tonight. First off, the way the embankment removal, it's a traditional capital project where you have an engineering firm design the bid package and then you put it out for public bids. So it's design bid build phase. Versus these trail bridges, usually you hire a company to put them in. You don't design it separately and then bid out that project. It's just one company that they have their different styles of bridges and they just come in and build it. So that's one reason why it's separated. Another is that we have long-standing said that this phase would not move forward to construction unless it was fully funded or nearly fully funded by grants. And so that would mean at least $3.2 million of grant money. Right now we have $750,000, so we've got a big gap to cover. So the timeline, of this project ever going to construction, it's certainly not next year, may not be in 5 years, may not be in 15 years. Just depends on the funding. And since the inlet has been fixed, the immediate concern for flooding and hazard has been alleviated. So we are moving forward with this phase because that's our commitment to the regulatory agencies. But beyond, once this is completed, basically the plan is to put it on the shelf and continue to seek out grant funding. And then, should we have grant funding and move closer towards the construction phase, then we would then move forward with a contract with a bridge design build firm that would then do that work. So that's another reason why we don't want to try and do that work now, because it may be a wasted effort. And that concludes my brief project update for you, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Director Bronze? Okay, your explanation, as always, was very thorough, so
Thank
thank
you.
you for that. Okay, City Manager report. City Manager Pingle, who is with us remotely tonight. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Just a couple of things. A couple of things were covered by council members and the mayor. I did want to touch on Newcastle Trails. It was great to be able to be a part of their annual meeting, and really, I felt like I got a pretty thorough introduction to Newcastle Trails with Peggy and Gary. They took me on a tour just after I had started, and which was fantastic. But it was awesome to kind of get a bigger picture of what's been done more recently and how we're moving forward. It was also great to be there with so many in attendance. The city was certainly well represented. Councilmember Villasenor was there, along with Director Bronze and Director Hoffman. Our Parks and Trails planner, Davi De La Cruz, was there, along with a couple of planning commissioners, Commissioner Godzik and Kennard. And then Commissioner Sticks from the Community Activities Commission was there. And so super appreciated the conversations before and after and having the opportunity to be a part of it. Just a heads up and a little bit of update. Still working with Holly as far as trying to get nailed down times to meet with our delegation, looking at potentially Thursday morning, but things change so quickly. I'm just trying to keep up with her as far as what may be available and what may not be. And so we're having to try to be a little bit nimble with those. And then just to come back to the slurry seal, appreciate Councilmember Clark and the conversation I've been able to have with him. So a couple of things that want to make sure we all continue to reiterate and certainly invite Director Bronze to add anything he deems necessary. But at this point, we're still in a contract time frame. The contract had a 1 year time frame as far as completing the project. And so we're in a position where we have to honor that. We gave them punch list items that they needed to complete, and they weren't, just due to the weather and time of year, they weren't able to complete them before the weather turned, and so they still have an opportunity to do that. And so we've been, I want to continue to reiterate if we were to pivot or do something else, myself, Director Bronze, we're simply not going to provide that recommendation while we are still within a contract time frame. And so we also want to continue to be clear that while we certainly were disappointed in the execution of the project from the contractor, the pavement, the condition of the project at this point, with being 8 or 9 months in, seems to be on par with what other slurry seal projects in other communities where they've been at this point, 8 to 9 months after it being laid down. And so we're hesitant to be to make a call that it's unacceptable or that we need to pivot or do something different when we can't deem it unacceptable based on what other communities have experienced. And we're also within a time frame where they still have punch list items to complete. And so we have to let that process play out. We put ourselves at legal risk if we don't. And so we want to make sure that is clear. And if the council has questions, we want to answer those regarding that. Now, another part of what Councilmember Clark and I talked about was that, there's been a couple of comments about, well, we need a plan for how to fix it. Again, we need to let the process play out to know if there's something to fix or what's the best, or what needs to happen moving forward. We still have to let that process play out. Also, I just think it's completely critical that if staff's going to go spend some time looking at potential alternatives, so if we get to a year or we get to a point to where either the project is unacceptable or it's an acceptable project but we just don't like it as an option moving forward, we can't go spend a whole bunch of staff time coming up with alternatives and costs without council direction. And so while we've had a few comments, certainly from the community and from a couple of council members, it's critical that if we're going to go spend time on alternatives and bringing costs back to the council, that's a council decision, not something that we're just doing solo. Primarily because we're still within our contract time frame with the project, and we certainly from from our standpoint, from staff standpoint, or certainly are at a point where we can deem the project unacceptable or incomplete, because there's still work for the contractor to do. I'll leave it at that for now and take any questions or comments, and certainly invite Director Bronze to provide any other comments or insight.
Director Bronze, anything to add?
No, I think City Manager Pingle said it quite well. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? I think we're good. City Manager Pingle, thank you. Okay, moving on. Before I bring the consent agenda forward, I just want to call attention for the City Council. In front of you on the dais tonight is an adjusted resolution 2023-942 for item number 8.3 on our consent agenda. There was a Scribner's error that occurred, and it was realized shortly before our meeting this afternoon, and the time did not permit republishing of that corrected resolution, so therefore you have it in front of you. So that said, we would be approving the consent agenda with the amended resolution on item number 8.3. Okay, so is there any objection to approval of tonight's unanimous consent agenda as amended for item number 8.3, the resolution? Okay, if not, please show the amended consent agenda approved. All right, moving on. We have no public hearings, no unfinished business. We do have 2 items on general business. Item 11.1, Director Bronze touched on it a few minutes ago, and that is adoption of Resolution 2023-940, design contract for Phase 2 of the Newport Hills Creek Railroad Embankment Surface Water Management Project S017. Director Bronze.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm available to answer any questions. I covered what I think is relevant related to the agenda item. Again, this contract will prepare the final design, and the expectation is that will be used for two reasons. One, to have a more accurate construction cost. Right now we just have a planning level cost. And 2, to satisfy our commitment to the regulatory agencies.
Thank
and with
you.
That, I'll turn it over to any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Director Bronze? Councilmember Villasenor?
Thank you for clearing up the timeline on it. So for the people who use that trail and have come to use it, there's no immediate change for them
That's
to
correct.
expect. So
Right.
from a trail usage perspective, they're not going to see any changes anytime soon. Well,
Right, I'd say-
in at least a couple of year time frame.
Right. The most aggressive, let's say we were very successful in numerous grants. I'd say 2025 would be the soonest, and that, I don't really think that's practical. It'd be more if we're aggressive in pursuing grants, 2027, 2028, right?
Right.
And then it may never get constructed.
Right. So that's good to know, because the people who came in and voiced their concerns around this change in the trail, just to let them feel a little bit better about this process. There's a long way to go still.
Correct. And we are just another in terms of public outreach. There's a project sign out there, and that's going to be updated. Figured wait till once this design contract's, if it's approved, then we would give the current status and where we are, and then update the website to reflect that as well. And then the next milestone for public outreach would be once the design contract's done, and then it'd basically be the status is seeking grant funding for construction.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Any motion out there? Councilmember Charbonneau.
All right, I just had a quick question about I'm seeing 76,000 earmarked for grant reimbursement. So is that sort of a means of that if we're not using the entirety of the grant, we give it back to the who issued the grant? We can't use that for future, sort of the next phase.
No, the two grants are allocated to this specific scope of work. Right, so when you have a grant, typically it's assigned to a specific project and a specific scope of work. So the two grants are for the phase 2 final design. The $750,000 I mentioned earlier, that was specifically earmarked for construction.
All right.
So our choice is if we don't, the grant will go away if we don't use it for this phase.
Okay, any other questions? Any motions? Councilmember Clark.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, and just to clarify, it's, there's a total of $156,322 in grant funding for this phase. I think the 76,000 you referred to, that was a grant reimbursement for phase 1, so we've already received that money.
Councilmember Clark, go ahead.
I move adoption of Resolution 2023-940 approving a design contract with Osborne Consulting as presented.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Clark, seconded by Deputy Mayor Sherlock, to adopt Resolution 2023-940 approving a design contract with Osborne Consulting Incorporated as presented. Councilmember Clark, would you like to speak to your motion?
No comments.
Deputy Mayor Sherlock, anything to add?
No.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to adopt Resolution 2023-940 approving a design contract with Osborne Consulting Incorporated as presented. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Moving on to item 11.2, potential motion regarding an opioid settlement agreement. Councilmember Charbonneau?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the City of Newcastle agree to participate in the settlement agreement between the State of Washington and opioid distributors Teva, Allergan, CVS, Walgreens, and Walmart, and authorize and direct the city manager to sign all documents necessary to ensure Newcastle is a participating local agency in the settlement.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Charbonneau, seconded by Councilmember Griffin, that the City of Newcastle agree to participate in the settlement agreement between the State of Washington and opioid distributors Teva, Allergan, CVS, Walgreens, and Walmart, and authorize and direct the city manager to sign all documents necessary to ensure Newcastle is a participating local agency in the settlement. Councilmember Charbonneau, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you. Very quickly, the Washington State Attorney General won a very large lawsuit against these opioid distributors, and by participating in the settlement, we get money that is paid back as sort of recognizing as a level of harm from those distributors that can be used to our discretion, very much no strings attached. It will not be a large sum, and we'll explore down the line how that money would potentially be used.
Councilmember Griffin, anything to add?
No comment.
Okay, the motion on the floor is that the City of Newcastle agree to participate in the settlement agreement between the State of Washington and opioid distributors Teva, Allergan, CVS, Walgreens, and Walmart, and authorize and direct the city manager to sign all documents necessary to ensure Newcastle is a participating local agency in the settlement. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you to our legal team. All right, moving on to additional public comment. Any signups? Anybody in the audience wishing to speak? Please state your name and the neighborhood in which you reside. And you have 3 minutes to speak. The timer is right there on the podium. And welcome, Peggy.
Okay. I'm Peggy Price, and I live at 9131 122nd Place Southeast in Newcastle. And it's a little late, but I sent photographs to Davi that I took last Wednesday, of Newport Hills Creek at various places. And I really wonder if we could quibble about its being a possible fish-bearing stream, because it's above May Creek Park Drive, it's completely muck. There's no way salmon could possibly live there. And it is, because of the developments around it, it has become a seasonal stream. It's dry during the summertime. So it seems like an awful lot of money to spend when it wouldn't do the good that they want it to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comment?
Yeah, I hadn't intended to speak, but I do have to stand in support of what Peggy says, that I think over the years that so-called salmonid stream has become less and less a salmonid stream. Most of the water now comes from developments and retention ponds. And I hope before we go through a lengthy search for grants, we do another study and find out if it really is a salmonid stream. I just don't think it is. So that's, you know, I'm kind of trusting that this final project will never get done. That's my big hope. Thank you.
And for the record, would you mind stating your name
Oh,
and the
sorry.
neighborhood in which you reside?
Gary Camp, and I live in the Hazelwood neighborhood.
We all know you, but
Yeah. Forgot the protocol. Thank you.
thank you. Any further comment? Okay, anybody on virtual? All right, seeing no further comment, I'll close the public comment period. Planning calendar. City Manager Pingle, Director Bronze, I'll let you guys arm wrestle for that one, whichever it's easier to
I have it in
introduce.
front of me. I can kick it off.
Okay,
Not a ton to go through. As far as April 18th meeting on consent, we'll have a couple of those projects that Director Bronze mentioned in his report, awarding the Newcastle Way bus shelter relocation construction contract, as well as the Lake Bourne Park improvements phase 1, which is the crosstown trail, which we are super excited to get going. I know that those are, you know, it makes complete sense to put those things on consent, but just want to call attention to those projects as they get going. Those are exciting projects to get under construction. And then as far as general business for the April 18th meeting, we anticipate having the budget amendment ready for the council. And really that's as the council is aware, that's primarily a housekeeping budget amendment as far as bringing our year-end 2022 forward into 2023 budget. I think we have two main things that we'll be bringing forward along with year-end. One of them would be, I think it's actually the T38 project, but Director Bronze will have to correct me if I'm wrong on that one. We anticipated getting that done in 2022 and we did not, and so we're getting that done in 2023. We also received the $25,000 for police that we did not get spent in 2022, so also moving that $25,000 forward into 2023. And with that, I'll take any questions. As far as bringing the arch item back, at least initially, we'll plan on May 2nd for that. Just, I guess, kind of high level planning, and I'll give the council updates if that can't happen or if that needs to get pushed back. But that's what we'll anticipate for the arch item is May 2nd.
thank you. Any questions for Councilmember Charbonneau?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. City Manager Pingle, I'm wondering if we could, given that the only general business we have on the 18th is the budget amendment, you said might be more housekeeping. I did want to clarify, I think we could do, I could get the staff from King County if we wanted to have the discussion on what the Economic and Community Development Committee recommended of K4C membership. And I'm just suggesting that because I know that will be probably a PowerPoint presentation and welcoming someone, so I'd rather try to suggest it for a day where there's not as many things. If we can't do it the 18th, that's fine, but I'm just throwing it out there that it's definitely a possibility that I think we could turn around fast.
I think that's a good suggestion, and I'll definitely bug Mayor Newing and Deputy Mayor Sherlock on that one. Just haven't had that opportunity yet, so I received that that update from you, and we'll get that scheduled. But I agree that might be a great time.
Councilmember Lakota.
Just a quick question, Scott. Any update on the town hall venue and date?
I don't have an update on the town hall. Again, both venues are available at this point. I don't have an update.
Any other, Director Bronze.
I just wanted to thank Scott for bringing up the T30, that is T38 for a budget amendment, and I had that on my slides and I just overlooked it. So yes, that's, we had the money in the budget for 2022 and just the construction didn't occur as we had hoped. And one other item, just it made me think about it when you mentioned that police funding. So we are getting another $25,000 from the Department of Ecology for our capacity grant, which has to be spent by July 1st. So that's a good win for the city, but that also may be an item we want to bring as additional revenue in the budget amendment. And that just got signed today, I believe.
All right, anything else? Okay, with that, we'll adjourn. Charlie, thank you. Great to see you.
Thank you, everyone.